Hello. Bravo. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be here. The World is My Country Club. And I'm your facilitator, Melanie Bennett. I'm also the producer on the actual film, The World is My Country, that I hope you've all seen. And theworldismycountry.com, you can see it. And we are here, our club is here to discuss how we can build a workable world where we human beings can live in harmony with the rest of the living beings on the planet. So that is what we're doing. We're going to have a great future. We're going to have a great time today. I get the very, very wonderful honor of introducing our wonderful special speaker today. He actually worked for American Friends Service Committee doing documentaries to help stop the Vietnam War, and then went on to the Center for Defense, helping to prevent nuclear war. He made War Without Winners, worked on The Day After, which is amazing. He did research for that. He is also a journalist and a writer. His mission in life is to inspire the world towards a peaceful and positive future. So, and he's here today to give us a sneak peek into his book called How to Save the World, a Personal Memoir. So please, everyone welcome Mr. Arthur Kanegis.
Well, thank you, Melanie. As Melanie mentioned, I'm in the process of writing a book called How to Save the World, a Personal Memoir. How did a kid come up with a mission that he had to save the world? Well, back when I was 3 years old, my dad I said, Daddy, why don't they take all the guns and melt them down and turn them into doorknobs? And ever since, it's been my mission to figure out how can we open the doors to peace. I had some pretty incredible parents for a kid to say something like that. My mom was incredibly spiritual. She passed away when I was 4.5, but she left beautiful writings. And among them, she had a beautiful quote. She said, wrote in 1942, she was called Lily back then. She said, I am a conscious individual manifestation of eternal being, endowed with the current and nature of my Father, Mother, God. This guarantees my well-being at all times. I am a radiant manifestation of life, love, and power. Life is the essence, love is the nature, and power is what moves me. Now, when I read that in her writings, it just blew me away because, you know, it seemed way ahead of its time. You think of some of the great teachers today teaching writings like that, and she was saying this back in the 1940s. And my dad, he printed up these little sayings. Tom is actually on the line. He helped do some reprints of these cards. They're little cards, and he wrote, seek not to contest with evil, lest you be taken by the spirit of contention. Rather, concern yourself with goodness, for in goodness is the leavening that makes the whole loaf rise. Well, that was a powerful, powerful lesson for me, because it seems that the more we fight evil, the more we struggle against it, the more we're creating and empowering it. You know, every time people bash Trump, how did he get elected? Because everybody was bashing him. That gave him more power. Every time people bash the Islamic militants, they get more power. They just loved it when people bashed them. You know, the more we fight evil, the more we empower evil. So the more we can just step back and tune in to that place of calm inside, we can begin to get a certain strength, a certain ability to begin to create shifts in the world. Now, what happened is, coming up out of a life like that, I ended up, when the Cuban Missile Crisis came along, I remember in high school, I was in Washington, D.C., and the teachers and everybody, the students, everybody was totally alarmed. You know, there was this it looked like nuclear war was about to start. We were told to do these drills where we were told to run and hide under our desks and put our hands over our heads. And I said, no, I said, this is ridiculous. Washington, D.C. is going to be totally leveled in a nuclear war. It's not going to help us to be under our desks. And I refused to do it. I said, we've got to prevent nuclear war, not prepare to hide under a desk. Well, I got sent to the principal's office for that. I got sent to the principal's office a lot for bringing peace pilgrims to speak to our school and various other unauthorized acts of love for our planet. But in any case, what happened is in that time where everyone was mobilizing and where it really looked like we were on the verge of total destruction, I had this deep, deep inner pain. It's so different than just thinking I might die or my family might die, but all families, all lives, all art, all music, all the incredible creations of humanity, all the species and wonderful beauty of this planet, and all these species all being burned in blown up in a nuclear war that would not only immediately destroy a lot of people, but then set in motion climate changes that would destroy the world. And out of this deep despair, I went down to the basement and I meditated. And in my meditation and in my centering and getting deep, I thought back to a song that we learned in the in Friends Meeting of Washington when I went to preschool, and it said, it said, "There's an ocean, ocean of darkness, and I drowned in the night. Till I came through the ocean to the ocean of light, and the light is forever, and the light makes us free. I will dwell in the glory of the light," said he. "Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. In my old shaggy breeches and my shaggy locks, I am walking in the glory of the light," said Fox. George Fox was the founder of Quakerism. And I realized, and he wrote that at a time when people were being thrown in dungeons and tortured and treated terribly oppressed for standing up against the established church and saying there's a light inside of each of us. We can follow that inner light. We don't have to believe that everything the church says is God. And today we face many similar challenges. And yet, even in that darkness, he realized that we have a choice of going in that light. And when I thought about it, I said, oh my God, here I am focused on the death of our planet. And at the same time, all over the world, people are helping each other, helping people in their families. They're reaching out across the planet to do care for people who are in trouble. When they hear the news, they get alarmed, even about a cat stuck in a tree. I mean, people are filled with love and caring for others and helping others. And the world is regenerating. Parts of it get damaged and they regenerate and self-heal. And there's just an incredible ocean of light going on. And I realized that I have to make a choice in my life. If I dwell in that ocean of darkness, it gets deeper and darker and more murky. And the deeper you delve into it in every single issue, the worse it is. If you thought this was bad, you can find 5 documentaries that show it was 10 times worse. And if you thought they were bad, it's actually really 100 times worse. And it's even worse than that, folks. And the more we delve into that ocean, the more we drown in it. And then we step back and we realize that we can step into that simultaneous ocean of light. And both are 100% true. Both are completely real. And the question is, which one empowers us more to dwell in it? And I realized that if I dwell in that light, don't ignore that darkness. You still have to get people to rise above it, but you dwell in that light and attract people from that darkness toward the light. It's like my dad said, when you're fighting evil, you're empowering it. But when you're that little bit of leavening in that loaf of bread, well, that bit of leavening, it's so little, it's like a teaspoon. And here I got this mighty lump of thick, gooey stuff, and I'm going to take this little tiny teaspoon and do something about it. But you put that teaspoon in that loaf, you knead it in, and pretty soon out of that knead grows something. When you add that heat, that warmth that rises it rises into a whole loaf. And we can do that in the world, folks. And so that's how I got the mission that, I knew we had to save the world in a hurry. And the best way to do it was not for me to keep exposing the bad. I mean, yes, we had to do it, but I had to step into the light. Now, as I got older, I continued to work for this, working for the American Friends Service Committee, putting out documentaries to help stop the Vietnam War. And some of the work we were doing with doing research on exposing some of the connections of various factories to the war machine and other things. Many of these things really helped concretely lead toward the end of the Vietnam War. We can talk more about the steps that did that. And I began to work after that for the Center for Defense Information, as Melanie mentioned. Now, this is a group of retired military officers who were speaking out for peace. Admiral LaRocque, the founder, was this incredible guy whose kids, Annette, John, and so on, they were marching on the Pentagon while he was inside planning nuclear wars. And this kind of shook him up to get thinking. And he started thinking, my God, this is crazy. We can't fight and win a nuclear war. I took an oath to protect and defend my country. Well, the only way to protect and defend my country is to avert a nuclear war, not to try to fight and win one. And so he reached out to the Quakers when he was about to retire and said, can you help me set up this Center for Defense Information inside the Fund for Peace? And this organization got started. We got Paul Newman on our board. We would do testimony to Congress. We helped expose the chemical and biological war. The chemical biological warfare ban was just being modified, and really was still continuing. We had great accolades from the New York Times and others for some of the exposés we did. And we did a lot of this work to try to, still on the side of struggling against evil, but bringing the light of truth to what was going on, not just arguing or fighting, but just bringing out the facts and the reality. And then I had the incredible opportunity to work with The Day After. The producers needed to know how to build their sets. You remember the film about nuclear war with Jason Robards walking through the ruins of nuclear war? 100 million Americans saw this film and 200 million Soviets. It was the biggest TV audience of any movie ever. And so what I was doing is faxing out information on what the bomb damage would be each distance from the epicenter so they could build appropriate sets that were realistic. And as I was doing that research, I began to get more and more depressed. I was dwelling in that ocean of darkness. I was just so torn up as I began to realize that we were on a first strike nuclear policy, that there was so likely that accident, miscalculation, or design could set off a nuclear war, and the depth of despair about what nuclear war would do, that I would wake up with nuclear war nightmares. Now, normally, you can wake up from a nightmare and you say, thank goodness it was only a nightmare. There's not really any monsters under the bed, I hope. But I would wake up from these nightmares and get even more and more scared in my waking time because it was so real. It could have, 20 minutes from now, we could all be gone. And it was out of that panic that I again remembered back to that song and decided to take that step of actually dwelling in the ocean of light. And so what I did is I suggested to Admiral LaRocque, why don't we, well, actually it started off, I was meditating I was meditating on the kind of, on the despair of what was going on. And it came to me when I thought about that song that what we need really are not just movies like the one I made, War Without Winners, with Paul Newman, that exposed the risks and dangers of nuclear war, and not like The Day After. I mean, those are important, but we need those facts out there. But I realized we need to give people a vision of what we want to move toward, that just scaring people isn't enough. I mean, you can get scared about nuclear war and say, well, we better get all the bombs we can to deter it as long as we can. Or you can say, well, I'm just going to drop out and what the heck, the world's ending anyway. Or, if you want to empower people for change, you have to give them a vision of what to move toward. Without vision, the people perish. With vision, we really have a chance of moving toward it. And I began as a young person to take to take the Dale Carnegie course, to read books, learn about books about how we can start visualizing. In fact, with my dad, we were going to some meditation courses where we learned the power of positive visualization, and that if we can create an image of what we want, and we can create that image so real, so we can feel it, we can taste it, we can know it, and if we can dwell in that image in our mind, we're more likely to move toward it. And that later came out as The Secret, and all kinds of athletes and people all over the world are using that power of visualization that I learned at a very early age. And so I said, well, look, you know, if in our personal lives, visualization can help move us toward what we're looking for, let's find a way to do that in our movies and our TV shows. So I came out of that meditation and we were meeting with Paul Newman and giving the report. We actually, with Paul Newman on our board, we would have board meetings. And because Admiral LaRocque was a retired admiral, he had access to the Pentagon, even though he was criticizing. In fact, when I was working on the research for the film the day after, I would go over to the Pentagon every day and do photo research and find things. And I'd talk to Bob Bachman. He was the librarian there at their thing. And he'd say, oh, I saw your admiral on TV the other night. I said, oh, what'd you think? He said, well, you know, you guys don't agree with us, but at least you're doing it the right way. You're testifying. You're not like these protesters out in the street. So we had a lot of respect because we were retired military, even from people who may not agree with our viewpoint, but respected the admiral. So he could get briefings in the Pentagon. So we set up, as part of our board meeting, we go over to the Pentagon and get a briefing. Well, this is a story. Here we are, a group of people who are challenging the military budget, challenging unneeded weapons, challenging nuclear war, and we're walking into the Pentagon. And the halls are lined with secretaries and people from all the offices, secretaries just swooning as we walk through. And Admiral LaRocque turned to Paul, who was beside him, Paul Newman, and he said, oh, ignore them. They do that for me every time I come. Paul got a good laugh. So anyway, we had our board meeting, we had our briefing, and I reported on the fact that even though the day after it reached so many people, the day after Spots and the War Without Winners, we had over 10,000 letters, very moving letters from people who'd say, you know, it was a life-changing experience. People would say, you know, I grew up in a military family. All my uncles, aunts, everyone in the military, and yet I never heard a military person speaking this way, and this is the way I feel. And we really touched a note that brought people together. And I had done this TV buying campaign where we bought TV time for our film War Without Winners in New York City. We'd pay like $15,000 to get it on Channel 5. Paul Newman gave a pitch in it for funding. We'd get in maybe 18, 19,000 back. We'd use that to buy time the next city, and we bicycled the film around the country, going to the major independent stations and all the networks. This, of course, was way before the internet or anything like that. And you'll see, well, we're going to actually put out a new revised version of War Without Winners to give you this historic film that you can click on and watch, because it becomes ever more relevant today when we're still teetering on that edge of nuclear war. And in fact, when the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists clock shows that we're actually closer to a midnight of unbelievable destruction than ever with climate change and nuclear war and the other threats to the very existence of life on Earth. So anyway, I said to Paul, well, so after the board meeting, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward came into my office. And Paul said, well, Kanegis, you know, what next? And I told him about my idea that, you know, had come to me that really, I said, why doesn't somebody in Hollywood make a movie about what a peaceful, positive future would look like? You know, not a placid lake, but something where the conflicts and challenges and problems were all being handled in creative and positive ways, where we were coming together as a planet, where we were interacting and building the kind of future we want. And Paul thought about it, and then he said, well, you know, Arthur, I don't think anyone in Hollywood knows what a peaceful future would look like. Why don't you do it? I said, well, me, I've only made documentaries. How could I make a feature film? Well, that set me on a path. I actually left the center because Admiral LaRocque said, well, this is great, but this is not what our purpose is. And I went on to establish an organization called Future Wave. And the WAVE stood for Working for Alternatives to Violence Through Entertainment. You know, I realized that the way we have to reach people is to tell stories. You know, Joseph Campbell and others have said that since the beginning of time, people learned from stories. They would tell stories around the campfire. And we find that many of the ills in the world are through telling the negative stories that repeat the idea that, you know, that the way to solve problems is to kill bad guys. And over and over again, we hear that story of the poor damsel in distress, whether it's the people of Iraq and then this big bully comes along, it could be Saddam Hussein, whoever it is. And then the hero has to go kill the bad guy, and then we live happily ever after. And that story that's repeated in movie after movie and TV show after TV show isn't real. I mean, you don't think about people around you. Who do you know who they had a problem and so they killed the bad guys, and and it solved their problem and they lived happily ever after. You know, it's a movie reality, much more than a real reality. The actual microscopically few cases of where it really was imminent, immediate self-defense are very limited. Usually that argument is used for excusing all kinds of attacks on others. And I realized that what we need is kind of a new mythology that takes us into the vision of the kind of world we really do want to choose. So going back to my story with Paul, after I set up Future Wave, I began to research and to think and to work on how do we create that positive future. And I came up with a proposal for a film series called Astrocops, Peace Engineers of the 21st Century. And it was to be one of these, you know, they call them they're blockbuster movies like Star Trek or others that are called franchise films or whatever. They begin to have toys and games and all kinds of other things going with them. And we wanted to create this series where people would dwell every year in a positive future, where futuristic peacekeepers were using techniques much more positive than violence. And we came up with all kinds of you know, pretend gizmos and gadgets, just like, you know, Star Trek came out with things like the Plazer or other stuff, but then many of these things they envisioned became reality. We envisioned things like a Plazer, a multi-purpose peace engineering tool that could do things like all kinds of multi-purpose functions, like it could reflect back at somebody who was attacking you, their own image when they see themselves in their anger attacking you. It could bring in informational images that gave them facts they didn't know. They're angry and furious and they suddenly see the reality. Or it could lock onto like the Shinmin point in the earlobe that can calm down someone who's out of control and out of balance. Acupressure point with a laser beam. It could you have a tickle laser. If somebody really was about to kill somebody, you just reduce them to spasms of laughter. They have to drop their gun. They can't do anything. They're being tickled all over. Things kids would have a lot of fun with playing. It had things like just an unbelievable number of imaginative functions, certain sound waves that would entrain the brain to calm you down, or even therapies like they know that you can stop traumatic stress syndrome with rapid eye movement. So it would project this little image that rapidly, you know, went back and forth in their eyes and snapped somebody out of a post-traumatic stress syndrome. And all kinds of games to get kids thinking, not necessarily some realistic, some unrealistic, but things to get their imaginations going on. How do we create a more powerful way than violence, a more powerful tool than the gun? The gun is so limited. Police departments all over the country are finding this. They have somebody out of control who's crazy. They don't want to kill that person, but the only tool they have to deal with this crisis is a gun. And I had a chief of police who told me, you know, we really wish we had some alternative, something that really would give us the power to stop the violence without, you know, killing people, which is, of course, not a very effective way to do it because it creates more anger, just like in wars. Every time you kill somebody, you create more enemies. You know, you just are magnifying the problem. And so we actually got fairly far with this. We got to show it to a network to get to show it to the head of Sony. They actually considered it, but they said, look, this is so new and different. We don't know whether this would have a market, whether people would go for this or not. You know, we really don't have enough experience to judge whether this would be worth putting the money into it. And so they backed off on doing the project, even though they thought it was a good film idea. And we hope to bring something like that back. We're working now on some other futuristic projects. We're hoping we can connect with the right people to bring back, because I think that is really the key to beginning to develop a people-powered planet, to begin to develop. I mean, we all know now the story about, I discovered Gary Davis's incredible movie. We can talk more about that in what'll be, you know, the next. Well, I'll tell you briefly about Gary's story because not everyone hearing this knows about it. As I was working on Astrocops, and after we went to Sony and we found, look, if Sony won't do it, who else would be willing to, you know, invest in a film like this? So we were kind of stymied on it when Gary Davis's son went with me to he suggested we try to go talk to some Silicon Valley people, see if we can get them to fund it. And he helped make some connections that he had. And we got somewhere, but we didn't get the thing funded. But he said, you know, if you want to make a movie about peace, you really ought to read my dad's book, My Country is the World. So I read it and I was blown away. I said, oh my God, this is such a cinematic story. This is so filled with action and adventure and inspiring, an incredibly inspiring story of one man who who was a song and dance man on Broadway, who was so horrified that he had to bomb a city of people, ordinary civilians, in World War II, and his own brother had just been killed. And he said, oh my God, why weren't the people who killed my brother arrested? Why wasn't I arrested for blowing up people in their schools and homes and factories? And he came to the realization that the reason is because outside of countries, killing people is not illegal. We have in the city, state, country, every level except the global, we outlaw murder, but not at the global level. We call it war. We call it glorious. We give medals for it. It's kind of crazy. And so he said, well, oh my gosh, if we want to eliminate war, we don't have to go to a lot of complex things. All we have to do is recognize that our country is the world, and the country is our world. No more wars. It doesn't mean, or no world war would be outlawed. It doesn't mean there won't be, just like in a civilized society, when it's going well and when we have positive, creative, community-based policing and positive things, there'll still be people who commit crimes, but then you handle it in a positive way. You put through the criminal justice system. You don't have a group that has violence committed against them blow up a whole city block and start lobbing bombs back and forth. Inside countries, if a state has a dispute, they don't go to war over it. California doesn't go to war with Nevada or anything like that. We take it to court. We solve it other ways. And we're exploring how to make those more effective. Yes, there's a lot of injustices in the criminal justice system, but at least we've got a system that we're beginning to work on that can bring us together and that can solve things in a far more powerful way than violence. So Gary said, well, okay, that's my mission. I've got to wake the world up to that we need to recognize that we are citizens of the world. So he went to Paris where the UN was meeting, and he pulled off this grand act of political strategy. You'll see a political theater. You'll see it in our trailer. You'll see it in our film, The World is My Country. If you go to theworldismycountry.com, you'll be able to see it. We even have a little shortcut we've put on YouTube at onefilms.com. Will take you to our YouTube video that has a shortened version of that movie along with our little short films, with this incredibly inspiring story of a man who actually had the courage to give up his national citizenship and offer himself to the United Nations as the first citizen of the world, and create a huge stir in Paris. Got all his act of political theater, which you'll see, it's ingenious when you see it, and it may remind you of what Greta did talking to the UN and other people. Well, he and Leonardo DiCaprio talking to the UN. Well, way before they spoke to the UN, Gary found a way as an actor to talk to the UN, and you won't believe when you hear how he did that. But he talked to the nations of the world, and it's just a long story. I don't want to get into all of it, but Eleanor Roosevelt, we'll put a separate chapter in here about Gary. But in this chapter, I just want to go back to the kind of conclusion of this, so we can open it up to questions and answers. But that is, I realized that if we want to save the world, we have to give people a vision of what we want to move toward. And that's what I'm working on as my key focus right now. And that's what we'll talk about in the other chapters of the book, is how do we create that vision? What does that future world look like? And how can we move from here to there? But now I would like to take some time to just open it up for some questions and discussion and interaction. So does anybody have a comment? Like Richard, do you have a comment, or anyone else? You have to unmute yourself. Richard, yeah, there you are.
Okay. I think this is all brilliant, Arthur. But again, can you elaborate on what this future film of peace will be?
Well, the one that I'm working on currently now, the proposal is called Earthians. I figured that would be a good title to draw us together. And actually, the draft story that I have now starts with a story of a young Black woman in New York who, a young teen whose mother works at the UN, has many, teaches her many different languages, and who, who's faced with this, well, first who learns in school the bully-proof skills that we laid out in our bully-proof program, which again, we'll have to put a separate chapter on that. But if you go to bullyproof.com or bullyproof.org, you'll see 10 steps that can build violence prevention using these animal characters. And she ends up being confronted in the situation of going out to do this bully-proof play in another school with school violence, with a shooter, and ends up using some powerful techniques to begin to turn around the school shooting and to help become one of the leaders in the student movement against school shooting, which then leads to the student movements. The student movements we have now are kind of part of the key to shifting the world. But in this one, it takes it forward. If you imagine someone like a Greta or something actually being part of creating what Gary talked about in this film, this people-powered planet, and moving it forward to how it actually is beginning to, week after week, resolve these problems. So every week when kids tune into this TV show, they would be dwelling in this positive future where we, the people, interactively are engaged in a system that brings to the top the highest and best wisdom of the planet, the synergistic system we talked about. It's a step beyond the old win-lose democracy. You see, in the win-lose democracy, in majority rule, 51% win, all the others lose, and it's a race to the bottom. Everybody's trying to get to that, percent to win, and so they're trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator. If instead, what Gary Davis talked about in our film, if you step back and look at what is governance, and if you look at the fact that we, the people, all the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence says it is the right of the people to institute new government. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, passed unanimously, as partly helped triggered by Gary's story. We'll tell you more about that in a later chapter. It says the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. Almost every constitution echoes the same sentiment, and yet there's no voice of the people at the global level. The UN has no way now they're just starting now this conversation. Internet globally is kind of part of what we're talking about, where people are talking about the future they want and what they envision and what the kind of institutions we need in the world. But that's the kind of thing we need, where people are interactively involved in being solutionaries. In other words, if you take groups on opposite side of a war, Arabs and Palestinians, say, or any other conflict, and you say who's right and who's wrong, you'll just continue to battle it out and get worse and worse and more angry. But if you take the same group and you put them together in one room, and you have certain techniques that start with people kind of revealing, that open people up to revealing who they are and what they really want in life, and what are their really basic needs. And someone will say, well, I just want to have, a secure future for my kids. I want to feel safe and secure. I want to feel like I don't have enough economic support that I can live a good life. And the other people say, well, that's the same thing I want. Well, that's what I want. And you start finding we all have certain similarities. I mean, you start hearing each other's stories. You start saying, wow, well, there's many, many examples of this, wonderful films. There's Free Trip to Egypt, where a fellow went to Trump rallies with a sign saying free trip to Egypt. And he got some very anti-Muslim people to come with him on a free trip to Egypt. And they began to fall in love with their host families. And they said, gee, I wish all Muslims were like you. Gee, I wish all Jews were like you, or whatever. And when you create that personal contact, you come together. Now, amazingly, one of the side effects of this pandemic is that people are connecting with each other via Zoom. And when you start making those connections across the planet, and we have this Rotary E-Club of World Peace, where you really begin to get to know people as fellow members of your club. Well, if you set up a system that Gary called a synergistic system, which is a lot to this. This is a big question. If you take the old organization chart, the president was on top. Under him, the king was on top. That's what sovereignty originally meant. The sovereign was the king, and the king was on top, and everybody else was below him. And it was and then if you take that and you turn it instead into a geodesic sphere. You've all seen the geodesic sphere with all the spokes. Well, if you take that as your organizational model, say for a company, if in a company that's the organizational model. Then then management is indeed on top of the world when it comes to managing and getting things to interact and work well together. But the janitor, if you just rotate that sphere, the janitor is also on top of the world, because if the toilets aren't working, if they're overflowing and stinking, the whole office shuts down. How can people continue to work if they can't go to the bathroom? Well, so he's on top of the world. But if he can't get supplies from the supply people, if he can't get toilet paper or paper towels or anything, or soap, then that falls apart. So every single part of that organization is on top of the world in their sphere. And if you take that model and you apply it to these Zoom meetings kind of thing, and you start having an interactive thing where each of us is kind of can be putting in our bet. What is it we really want for ourselves? What is the kind of future we want? We're solutionaries. We're not focused on who's right and who's wrong, but what is it we want to move toward? And you use, there's so many wonderful revolutionary conversations. There's a convergence thinking. There's so many programs people have developed that help us bring out the best in people rather than the worst. And then you begin to create a system where these interacting small groups are coming to conclusions of what they want and interacting those with others. And you set up a system where the more diverse those groups are, like if your group has people who are on total opposite sides of issues and you come to a conclusion, that has more weight in the algorithm that amalgamates the will of the people than if you're all people who started out the same and you're all still agreeing with each other. That's good, but that doesn't have as much weight as when you say, okay, well, look, we really want our opinions to be heard more at the national global level. So we're going to invite a Muslim, we're going to invite a person, whoever is the opposite of our issue, we're going to invite them to come in our club. And people who agree that they will come into a club of people of opposites and work this through, they gain extra points. You know, just how on eBay and Amazon and all those, the rating system helps a lot. I mean, people really are so much more responsive to what customers and others want when they know they're being rated. So if you're all being rated by your peers and others, and the more you kind of give good service and rate and help other people, the more you rise in your ability to impact the world decisions, the more people will be cooperating and doing positive things. You know, notice we have to build into the structure. We have to realize that the reason people do bad things for the most part is that structurally, the system is a race to the bottom, both the economic and the political system. The political system, because it has to get, the 51%, you've got to get the biggest coalition of, so you take the lowest common denominator. Many people want better things, but they can't say them because they might not win the next election. And the economic system, actually, if a corporate executive says, look, I want to put the interests of the planet first, the economic system brings him down. The economic system says, no, you've got to put the need of profit first. And people who actually suppress the good they want to do in the world, I think more people want to do good, basically. I mean, unless there's some rewiring problem or there's some mental disturbance, most people actually want to do good and they're trying the best they can, but the system is structurally making them do it in bad ways. If we can shift the system to one that rewards and empowers people who are making the right decisions and interactively brings out the highest and best of people, then that's so much more likely to come to conclusions, so positive conclusions. So in our film, we might project, a future world parliament where not only are the people who kind of got the most points and ratings of being good people who are representing others and bring things together, where they may go physically to the meeting, but all of the world, other people can participate, and people with the best ideas anywhere could maybe get a few minutes to talk to the whole global thing. And there's maybe a big board where it's amalgamating, is popping up a suggestion from one person or another, and you're coming to conclusions of, like, how do we pass a Clean Air Act for the planet? Where we're trying to reach the decisions of the things that affect the entire planet. This isn't to meddle in small things, but the things that, each thing should be taken care of at the most local level possible. Gary Davis talked about glocalizing, global and local at the same time. Decisions affecting our community should be made by this interactive kind of group decisions at the local level, but the things that affect the whole planet. And it's incredible when you hear these astronauts talk in the wonderful Bellagio film and others. We had Bellagio, we had that on one of our earlier Zoom talks. And the astronauts talked about that incredible thin layer of atmosphere they see from the air, and they'd see how somebody burning their crops, how that smoke was going up and where it was entering the currents and how it was going around the world. And they would see that the world is one living Gaia, living organism, and that everything somebody's doing is affecting the whole planet. There's a wonderful thing that Dr. Takamura has called Tangible Earth. We have that, a connection to that on our website, where he has a physical Earth that you can feel and move, and you can bring out different parts. You can even track birds flying around the planet or any single part of it. And you see that this is a living, interactive organism. And once we consider thinking of the world that way, and we think of how we as humans need to develop a kind of a new operating system for us as humans that's in line with Gaia, that the current operating system of 195 nations in the UN who are taking each one having to put their own self-interest first, or they would be losing power, that they aren't capable of really creating that integrative system, that we need a system that comes from the will of the people at the bottom and creates a new integrative system that can help our whole planet thrive. So we're hoping to visualize this kind of a future in a film where kids can play in it and dwell in it, and get that into their imaginations and begin to create that kind of a positive future. So thank you for that question. I know I've gone on quite a ways. Any clarifications you want on that or some thoughts?
Again, do you envision this as a like Star Wars serial set of films, or a TV series, or where it keeps building upon it, and then, as you say, you get all the games and little characters and T-shirts and whatnot? Or again, I'm just not sure as how you're envisioning the big picture.
Well, exactly. You know, Star Trek started out as just a TV series, and then it began to build into other things, from, like you said, the toys, the games. So they call them transmedia projects because they come out in video games, they come out in media, movies, TV shows. You know, they come across various media, transmedia projects. And also, when I was calling, they call them franchises because they have this logo, the Star Trek, that can connect to a lot of different things. And yes, I consider it that kind of project. Star Trek was actually an amazing breakthrough. Almost every, when I worked on the apocalyptic film the day after, and after I began to get the vision that we wanted to create a positive future, I went out to a video store and I began to look at all the films about the future, and every single one of them was apocalyptic. I couldn't find a single really positive vision of what we want to move toward. And so there are somewhere after the apocalypse, you know, people pick up the ashes and try to do some things, but nothing really that inspired us to head off an apocalypse and to save our planet, because we may never recover from an apocalypse with the state of nuclear weapons, and we know how it interacts with the environment. We could be ending up with what Stephen Hawking said of creating a Venus type atmosphere of 240 degrees on our planet, where nothing could survive, no life form as we know it. And so I don't think we can wait for after the apocalypse to fix things. I think we've got to find a way to inspire people to avert the apocalypse. And but Star Trek was very different because it depicted a future in which, in Gene Roddenberry's best vision, this was a future where these peacekeepers would travel around the world, the universe, finding problems and solving them in creative ways. Now, there are some of those who've used the series and the transmedia franchise have moved some of the things toward more violence and more of the old shoot 'em ups, but a lot of them really come back to that basic idea of how do we solve problems across different cultures and across different types of people and across different barriers of language. And so it really is an incredibly healing film that has inspired so many people and so many visions for the future. But I think that what we need is while that was very important, we need to picture it right here on Earth. I mean, yeah, it's fun picturing it all over the universe, but what does the future of the Earth look like? I mean, Star Trek does it briefly. They say there's a world government. They have it in San Francisco, their offices, and they say that no world can join the Federation unless they have a government for the planet. You know, you can't join the Federation if you don't have a government for your planet. I mean, when you think about it, you know, you can't run a school without some kind of way to govern it. You can't run a city. You can't run any complex organism with some governing system. And yet here at the global level, we don't. We have separate, we have 195 or more, but 195 in the UN, separate entities, each claiming sovereignty and no sovereignty of the whole. And what Gary said is Gary Davis said, we have to create the sovereignty of the whole. We have to create a sovereignty above the nations that really represents the will of the people of the world. And until we do that, we don't rate to get into the Star Trek Federation. We really don't rate to be able to keep our planet going in the world, because a system can't work. I mean, you're trying to drive a car with no steering wheel, you're going to crash. Well, here we're driving a planet with no steering wheel, and yes, we're going to crash. We need to develop that interactive steering wheel where we, the people, or the sovereigns, create that future. As Gary would say, he said, I came to the realization of why in the world am I banging my head against the wall, begging and pleading government leaders to make peace when they can't do it. Their loyalty is to the part, not the whole. It's we the people who are the sovereigns, and we have to come together not for the sovereignty of each individual, that each one runs off and does their own thing, but we begin to combine sovereignty. That's what governance means. We give a bit of our sovereignty for our common security, we give a bit of our sovereignty but we're the source of the sovereignty. We give a bit of it to be able to come up with better schools and highways and the things we need. But we have to give some of our sovereignty to the global level. Not all of it. We can still have city, state, local, but we need to add the top level of global citizenship and add that top level of sovereignty if we're to have any hope of saving our world in a hurry before it's too late, before we destroy it from these the multiple threats we face. Any other comments or questions?
Then, of course, the big one is always finances.
You got it. We don't even have I thought when we put out the film, The World Is My Country, and we got just incredible, the first showing was at the Minneapolis International Film Festival, and we got standing ovations. They had to have three separate showings, sold out audiences, people loved it. We started to get fantastic accolades. 95% of the audience feedback of people who saw it in person or online top rated the film. People wrote enthusiastically. If you go to theworldismycountry.com/applause, you can read the enthusiastic reactions and comments. We got very, very few negative ones. The very few negative ones were like someone said, well, I think we really have to put America first or something, but we can't be world citizens. But there's so few of those. It actually was so inspiring. And I thought, well, now this will open the door. We'll get funding, we'll get distribution. And we got turned down by all kinds of distributors. We struggled really hard we even had an incredible opportunity where through some very, very special networking, I was able to get it to the president of HBO documentaries. And he invited me to come to New York to talk about it. And I was so excited, you know, here we're gonna get it on HBO. And I walked into his office, or actually we didn't do his office. He said, can we meet outside my office, he said. And I didn't quite know why. He had us meet in a nearby coffee shop. And he said, well, Arthur, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is I really love your film. It's important for the world. The bad news is my job's being eliminated in a week. HBO was just bought out by Time Warner. They're eliminating my entire division. And there's no way the new corporate bosses are going to do this film. So that was disheartening, but it shows our film did have the kind of clout where a president of HBO would like to show it. And yet we haven't gotten distribution. We've now, just during this crisis, we've put it up free online at OneFilms via onefilms.com. We'll take you to the YouTube link. We figured, like, let's start building some support for it, and then maybe we can get there's enough people who like it that we can get Netflix to pay attention to it or others. But we're really struggling with funding even for something so simple as a documentary that's already made and has power. Maybe I just don't have the right connection. But how to get this whole thing funded is a challenge. I did put in a proposal to the Global Challenge Foundation that was offering like $millions in rewards for best ideas, for new ideas to improve the planet. And I networked to be able to meet with the guy who ran that, who donated the money for that, and so on. But they picked actually some very nice projects. Mine wasn't one of the winners, but one of them is a wonderful fellow named Sushiant who had a proposal for bottom-up democracy. And you'll see we have copies on our website If you go to theworldismycountry.com, it's on the talks page, Melanie. Where is that? Or is it on media? Anyway, we do have his wonderful presentation to the Rotary E-Club of World Peace. We're invited to talk about his system. It parallels a lot of what we're talking about. It has a lot of the tools for how we begin to evolve a people-powered planet. There are people all over the world talking about how to create a bottom-up democracy, and there's people talking about liquid democracy and wiki governing and other things. And people are starting to think of these ideas, but we need to interactively gel them, move them forward, and connect with the people who will provide the funding for this. But the first spark, I hope, is to create this vision and the idea, and then hopefully to attract the funding we need to do it. So, but that is the key question. Yes. How do we begin to scale this thing up from a small club that's getting started oh, Melanie, yes.
We have a question in the chat wondering, in the film, there is a picture of an app. Can you talk more about that in the film, The World is My Country?
Thank you for that. Yes, what we want to picture in the future, and you'll see, if you see the film, The World is My Country Again, you'll see Gary Davis says that, he says, we humans are a very inventive species. Why squander our genius on building smart bombs to do ourselves in? Why not invent SmartGov, a way we can interactively and heartfully govern our cities, our communities, our cities, and our world. And he talks about this whole interactive system that we're talking about. So you'll have to watch that film. But what we picture on screen is just a little app. You know, you get up in the morning, you say, well, I think I'm going to check. I'm very passionate about an issue. To me, I have this, creek flowing by that's polluted, and I want to clean it up, and I really want to see how I can be a part of it. So I go on this app, which we just called it for now SmartGov. You go to smartgov.net. Is it smart hyphen dot smart hyphen gov? What is it, Melanie?
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, put in the chat. Anyway, you go to that and you pop up this picture of the world. And in that picture of the world, you can click on, well, first you can click on, current issues. You can click on your issue, water, and you start interactively finding out who are the other people working on that. You can join a Syntegrity group. Gary called it Syntegrity, which is a synergy with integrity and with the tensile strength of that geodesic sphere. You see, synergy is a step above, consensus is a step above, win-lose democracy, but one person can block consensus and compromise, that's a little people giving up and other people giving up. Synergy is something different, where you come together in interaction and something comes out better than anybody started with. An idea that everybody, new things are created, and a synergistic system that actually, instead of win-lose democracy. And so anyway, in this little app, you then connect with other people working on the issue. You can find out what the latest issue is. Now, say that now there's a big debate going on passing, a Global Clean Water Act. So you can interact in it. You can put your opinions. You can create some inventive ideas. You can have a conference with people who have the exact same problem you have and find out and you'll immediately pop up, just like Google pops up the thing you're searching for, it pops up, what are the solutions that are most working, a solutionary thing. So, okay, here's different solutions around the world people have done. This was something that was really working for them. Let's apply that. And you find out what are the best solutions. And then you begin to interact with others and do it. And then you can begin to take part in, right from your app, and eventually in this global parliament that will eventually pass after it builds up percolates from the bottom, and after we come to some kind of conclusion, passes something like that Earth Constitution that's been created, or other things. We begin to percolate things like that up to the global level. So the app is just a simple way that everybody comes into it. Well, I think we're about running out of time for this session, but I hope you will all continue as we continue to envision how we the people can come together, save our world in a hurry, and do it through building what Gary talked about as a people-powered planet. And back to you, Melanie.
Wow, Arthur, bravo, yay! Incredible, really, really so informative, so much. It was packed chock full of information, and that is going to be a wow book. Good for you. Good for you. So everyone, look for that at your bookstore in the future. It's called How to Save the World, a personal memoir by Arthur Kanegis, our very own Arthur Kanegis. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. We'll look forward to more on that. And everyone, please remember to join us every week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. 10 to 11 every Wednesday. And here is our theme music to close. Thank you so much, Jacoustics.
Jacoustics is coming on the show August 5th.
Yeah, they're going to be on August 5th.
August 5th, we're going to have Jacoustic. We're going to have Dominique, the lead singer in Jacoustics. You're going to hear the song now. He's going to be on the show, and we're going to talk about his own connection to world citizenship. Sure to join us August 5th. And now here's the song by Jacoustics to close the show.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. Here we go.
Out of many we are.
Word citizen.
Out of many we are.
We are world citizen. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.